Yeah, so this is the last talk of the day. Thank you for bearing with me. And I know everybody just wants to leave and get drinks, so this will be a short one. And I'm here to talk about the Ethereum Community Fund, which is an initiative, which is a grant fund to support infrastructure, research, education, and community building initiatives that benefit the Ethereum ecosystem by providing both funding and connectivity. Oh, what did I do? So the Ethereum Community Fund is started by some of the most recognizable names in the ecosystem or Ethereum adjacent ecosystem like Cosmos, Go, Golem, Web3, Maker, Status, and is supported by the Ethereum Foundation. We work with them very closely. So the Ethereum Foundation also has a grant program which is similar to what we do, but we take a slightly different approach. So Vitalik Buterin himself is also advisor of the fund. So we're also growing our network. Other than those founding members, new members are also joining as donors. The recent ones are like SpankChain and QuantStamp. So the question is like, why? Why do we have to, like, why do we start ECF? So it's really not an old story that like Ethereum infrastructure, it's not really there to support millions of users. There's a lot of problems in scaling, usability, security, developer tools that are really needed for us to reach the point of just mass adoption. So although there's a lot of like funding went in the ICO craze, but the number of funding went into infrastructure building is actually relatively small. And also because infrastructure is a common good that belongs to everyone, there's no central party to control it, so it ended up belonging to no one, so no one really takes time and effort to maintain it. So from 2017, there's about $12 billion that went into all sorts of ICO investment, but the number of grants or the number of just nonprofit funding went into infrastructure building from various foundations, various programs, actually only 8 million. So grant funding is only a very, very, very tiny piece of like just tiny drop in the ocean comparing to all the crazy amount of money went into the blockchain space in general. And so the question is like, why, if I'm building infrastructure, why shouldn't I just take some investment money or tokenize my infrastructure or protocol? And the reason is sometimes, most of the times, community interest and the investor interest inherently doesn't really match. So we want to give people the optionality to build what matters, and we want to give them optionality to find the funding tool that is mostly aligned with the project's goal. So investor interest and community interest sometimes mismatch. The reasons are investors care about value accrual. Investors care about like building competitive advantage around their protocol or product. That means sometimes they prefer to keep the technology closed source if they can, to keep it proprietary. And also they care about tokenization because that's the vehicle they make money through the investment. They also care about monetization of the product. And communities care about different set of things. They care about building what's needed, not what's profitable. Even something isn't inherently profitable. They also care about best standards, best practices, and the high quality of code. So knowledge sharing is really good for community, but isn't necessarily good for investment. And utilities and provided for a broader use cases in the correct way also matters for the community and for shared infrastructure, but not necessarily for investors. And also, most importantly, as a community, they care about how to open source products, they care about how to attract more people to contribute. So because the inherent conflict of interest, we want to give people no string attached to money. So they can focus on building what's important instead of worrying about token sales or outside investors or monetization. So what we don't want projects to do is to force a token on itself prematurely or unnecessarily just for the sake of raising money. So the ECF comes to us one of like kind of the solutions to kind of like one of the solutions to solve the incentive problem in the blockchain space for building infrastructures. But we still are faced with a lot of challenges. So like for our grants program, it isn't really long-term sustainable. So we have to figure out what is the best way going forward to create a more long-term sustainable model so that we're not only based on donations, but there are also other innovative like models we can kind of experiment with. And also, how do we have more people participate in the grant-making decision? And also on the other hand, like how do we find the right balance between over-incentivization and under-incentivization? Because a lot of people who are working on open source projects doesn't necessarily care about the incentives or the reward. They care about the community. They care about the reputation. There are other various motivators that are not necessarily financial reward. So how do we strike the balance between incentivization as well as like other reasons people contribute to open source project? So those are all great questions and challenges for us to figure out. So what type of project do we fund? And number one is definitely infrastructure, scalability, privacy, security, either on protocol layer or on layer 2. So people often ask the question, when can Ethereum scale? And I think that kind of question isn't the best to ask because it assumes that there is some centralized party or someone else who's taking ownership of Ethereum scalability. And so I think there are so many ways a group of people can contribute to scaling, both on the layer 2 or on layer, both on the base protocol layer or on layer 2. So of course, the Ethereum Foundation, Vitalik, and all other researchers are doing the cutting-edge researches for scaling. But at the same time, there's also various organizations and teams working alongside with the Ethereum Foundation that are contributing in a very significant way for scaling. So for example, one of the groups that is working on a sharding client isn't part of the foundation. They're an independent group that received grants. So Prismatic Labs is the group working on the sharding clients, received money from both ECF and EF. So that's even on the protocol layer, you don't have to be part of the Ethereum Foundation or any centralized group to be able to contribute. And on layer 2, there are even more like players and more different parties kind of doing various scaling techniques. And I think even like if you just there are also other ways to contribute to scaling, such as like even improve the documentation or creating a new model to incentivize different people to work together to collaborate on scaling and keep in sync of the information, or even ways to bring new people into working on different scaling techniques. Those are all ways you can contribute to scaling. So it isn't really about one centralized party. It's a permissionless system. I think anybody can contribute. So we're promoting also, we're also looking for kind of standard on the layer 2 level, but in a non-rent-seeking way. So that's on infrastructure side. So on developer tooling side, we're looking for various tools that improves developer experience, like debuggers that come up over and over again. And people want better debuggers, people want better testing frameworks, people want better documentation. And those are all things that we're looking for that can improve developer experience. On the research side, new approaches to key challenges of the Ethereum technology, like privacy, scalability, and security, crypto economics. It's also about, it's not about promoting researchers within the communities as well. It's equally important to bring people to other disciplines like economics, like computer science, from outside the blockchain community to contribute to those active research areas. We also are very interested in understanding the current state of adoption, education, and developer experience. So for example, ETH Prize is a very great initiative where it interviewed more than 100 developers. These developers, through those interviews, you kind of understand what are the key challenges that everybody faces, and what are some interesting areas that are missing, and what are the tools that people all need. So we're also encouraging this kind of research/community thing where you go talk to people and find out defining the common challenges. So there are subgroups forming, there are the UX work groups, there's also the security work groups. We're looking to support those communities communities who are forming to not only just meeting, but also like working collectively as a community, but also like communicating what's important within that subgroup to the broader community, and defining like challenges and things that can be built to improve that subdomain within Ethereum. So on the user infrastructure side, we're looking for like user-friendly, secure wallets, both hardware and software, and Web3 clients. On the education side, we really want to keep the existing community engaged, as well as attracting new developers or new community members. So we're doing developer-focused community growth, like those conferences, to target and bringing more fresh blood into the ecosystem. So the requirement of grants, it has to be open source, it has to be a shared public good. It can not only benefit one single entity, it needs to be something the community wants as a whole. And the project shouldn't have planned for immediate fundraising through tokens or equity. And the reason for that is that it's not that we want to confine project to not take on other ways of funding. It's more like opportunity cost for us. And at the same time, we want so if the project in the current we want the project in the current stage to focus on building, but not fundraising. But in the future, if it's at a later stage where it makes sense for the project to raise other form of funding, we actually support it. We're also open to fund projects that built by individuals or teams that are from a for-profit or from a post-ICO entity. So for example, if the 0x team, and just example, we're not affiliated with 0x, but so if the 0x team wants to come in and build a open source MetaMask, which satisfies all other requirements for what we're looking for, we're happy to support projects of that type. So as long as it's open source, as long as it's utility for the community. So we're not only like supporting individuals, but we're also open to fund kind of public good projects by for-profit companies. So the application process works like this. You go on the website, submit ECF the network to submit the application, and there will be a team review and interview kind of process. And we also rely on all various technical experts within the ECF network to help us do due diligence. After the interview, the decision will be made relatively within 1 to 2 months is what we aim to achieve, but sometimes it's a little bit lower than that because we're still in the stage to figure out what's the best kind of streamlined process. And the average grant size is between 50,000 to 200,000 USD. That's in the range of, I would say, typical seed round for start funding. So after we post grants, we also provide all sorts of support for the grantees, including mentorship, networking opportunities, and also opportunity to showcase your project to ECF events and on our podcast. So also, it's really a community of like-minded builders that you can join. So some recent grantees include Prismatic Labs, Excellent, EastPrice, Swingby, which is a stablecoin protocol, Reality Check, which is Oracle protocol, as well as Gitcoin. So Gitcoin is a really great platform for open source software bounties, and we've been using Gitcoin to support some of the smaller sized bounties that is too much overhead for ECF to manage directly. So